I just said, it's ironic, really, that we're here at the Dialogue Society, and you've probably got more MPs here than you would have for a debate in the chamber. Maybe we ought to change venues. It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be with you here this evening, and many thanks to Osjan for all the work that he's been doing and the leadership he's given to the organisation. I was interested in the video, and somebody mentioned atheists in part of it, and it just reminded me of some years ago I attended Robin Cook's funeral, and the priest who was giving the service said, many of you will be shocked and surprised that one of the most celebrated atheists in British politics is here at this church. He said, I'll tell you why. He isn't any old atheist, he's a Presbyterian atheist. And I'm pleased to see so many eminent guests here. We've got people from the world of politics, pretty obviously, parliamentarians, welcome. We've got many people from different embassies, we've got ambassadors, we've got distinguished guests, and it really is, I think it says a lot about this organisation that you've managed to get so many people who are so interested in the work that you do. Some years ago, it was a chap called Enoch Powell, who some will recall, who was saying give them £2,000 to go back home. Speaking about people like me and others here today. And at the same time, Lenny Henry had just won the, was it the New Faces Award? Is that right? I'm too young to recall. But anyway, I take your word for it, the New Faces Award. And Lenny Henry was just collecting his prize at London Palladium. And he said, Enoch Powell wants to give me £2,000 to go back home. It's only £2.50 to Dudley. Which I thought was very powerful then, and is powerful today. Listen, I'm British, I'm English, I'm Lancastrian by birth, I'm an adopted Yorkshireman, a Burnley football fan, happen to be a Muslim. All those things I'm proud of. And there isn't many countries in the world where I think you can actually say that and believe it, without people being frustrated or anxious about you saying that. And this is, in my view, the greatest country in the world. The freedoms and the privileges and the rights that we enjoy here, I think, are second to no other country. It's a great pleasure on the 10th anniversary of the Dialogue Society to be with you and to celebrating this anniversary with all the friends who are here, and I'm sure that you could have packed many more hotels had you invited all the friends that you do have. I'm not surprised actually that there's this Turkish link, and I'm not surprised for a number of reasons. And you've said that in '99 you set up second generation British Muslims of Turkish descent. I was recently in Istanbul where I met with His Excellency Prime Minister Erdogan, and we had a really wonderful conversation, and I just thought that Turkey is uniquely placed as the bridge between East and West, Islam and Christianity, Asia and Europe, although the timekeeping for this event this evening leads me to believe more Asia than Europe, and I can say that. And I'm only saying that because my wife is waiting elsewhere. It's the one day in the year. Anyway, leave that to one side. I'm in trouble. Sincerely I am. But, you know, I think it's our belief, this government's belief, that a Turkish state as part of the European Union would send out a very powerful signal, would be good for Europe, but also good for the rest of the world. It was Lenin who said that there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. And I think we're privileged that we live and have lived in an era when we can honestly say that there are weeks when decades have happened. And if we look back, not that long ago, who would have thought that Reagan and Gorbachev would shake hands, perestroika ensued, the Berlin Wall come tumbling down? Who would have thought that Mandela and de Klerk would shake hands and apartheid come tumbling down? Who would have thought that Rabin and Arafat would shake hands, bring hope to the Middle East? Closer to home, who would have thought that Adams, Trimble and Hume would sign something called the Good Friday Agreement and bring peace to Northern Ireland? Who would have thought in 2009 that the United States would have an African-American president? And who would have thought in 2009 that Burnley Football Club would be in the Premiership? But we know that change isn't always a positive thing. We know that. Who would have thought, after some 50 years at the time, and the loss of 6 million Jewish lives and 11 million lives in total, Europe would once more witness the horrors of extreme nationalism and hatred, as we saw in Bosnia, Kosovo and elsewhere? Who would have thought that we would see 9/11, 7/7, Istanbul, Madrid? Who would have thought we'd see Muslims killing Muslims in the name of Islam? Who would have thought that in this enlightened millennium, every 3 seconds a child would die because of poverty? Every minute a woman would die due to pregnancy-related causes, and that every year 6 million people would die from HIV, AIDS, TB and malaria. And that's precisely why it's our belief, as one of the top 5 richest countries in the world, that we've got a responsibility that goes beyond our shores. And that's why I'm very proud that this government has announced that 0.7% of our gross national income will be spent on overseas development assistance, and that we're going to legislate to ensure that that happens. And don't get me wrong, of course there is some altruism there, but it's in our vested interest as well, because we live in an interdependent and interconnected world where things that happen thousands of miles away can have an impact on our doorstep. Things like resource scarcity, disease, climate change, even terrorism don't recognise national or international boundaries and borders. And so if we can make one part of the world a happier place, then the whole world benefits from that. As you were speaking, I was just crossing out lots of things, because you said many of the things that I was going to say, but I was going to give the example of your Noah's Pudding event, which is a very powerful example of how creatively you can reach out and have dialogue using food, as you say. It's always powerful. But also the work that you did with Faith Matters about the importance of dialogue in Islam, which promotes tolerance and is helping to dispel misconceptions about the Islamic faith. I have huge respect for the work of the Dialogue Society, and I'm very pleased that my department is supporting, in a small way, this very important work. It is taking a proactive rather than a reactive stance in tackling extremist activity, emphasising dialogue in Islam excludes extremist ideology, and by encouraging and equipping and empowering the Muslim community and Muslim community organisations and faith leaders in the practice of interfaith and intercultural dialogue. The Dialogue Society is de-radicalising by default. I'm also pleased, as we've been told, that on this anniversary falls the first English Interfaith Week, but also the 16th Annual Islamic Awareness Week, both events that my department is very pleased to be associated with and supporting. Interfaith Week has been facilitated by the Interfaith Network for the UK and my department. It is faith community led, with organisations around the country holding events from art exhibitions to interfaith seminars, from football matches to pilgrimage walks, from the good deeds of Mitzvah Day to the good food of shared meals, to bring major faith communities, as well as those with no religious beliefs, closer together. Both the Secretary of State, John Denham, and I recognise that there is immense practical value to society in having faith groups work closely together to overcome social division, promote cohesion and build social capital. Positive relationships between faith leaders helped sustain some communities under the intense pressure back in 2001, when other communities were exploding into riots. Most recently, the efforts of faith groups to build relationships not only amongst themselves, but also with the police, with politicians and councils, has helped manage tension in the face of extreme provocation from right-wing extremists, quite often linked to the so-called English Defence League. These issues are difficult, but many hundreds, if not thousands, of members of different faiths are working tirelessly and quietly to address them. This is something which we're deeply, deeply grateful for. Their efforts not only help to build communities' resilience to stress and tension, but also a powerful force for good and social change. And I tell you, in my own constituency, the power of dialogue. Not long ago, one of the wards elected a British National Party councillor, and I happened to have a coffee morning the next week. And there's about 30 people who turned up, and the idea of coffee mornings for me is actually to go and listen. I know that politicians like to speak, and I'm proving that this evening, but it was actually to go along and listen. And I went there, and I said to the 30 so people, I said, right, you can speak about anything you want. Nothing is barred. Let's have a really honest discussion. What are the issues? And there's a kind of unease in the air. And maybe it's because they just elected, not them, but the ward had just elected a BNP councillor. I'm not sure. And I tried to coax them to say something, and they wouldn't say anything. And I said, listen, you know, the whole point of me being here is to listen. And then one woman, she kind of notched up the energy and the courage to say, well, actually, we can't speak, can we? And I said, what do you mean you can't speak? She said, well, we can't speak, political correctness. And I said, of course you can speak. She said, well, the council won't allow us to speak. I said, believe me, you can speak, say what you want, please. I'm here to listen. And eventually, she said something like, is it true that Muslims hate Christians and want to take over the country? And I mean, I was very pleased. Not by what she said necessarily, but by the fact that she's actually said it. And I wasn't there to judge her, just to listen. And then other people started to speak. And it was a kind of similar ilk. I then said, well, listen, I'm not going to respond. I'm going to get 4 or 5 people from Saddletown, which is more or less 100% Muslim, to come along in a month's time and let them respond. And they agreed, and in a month's time we had this event. And it's like one of those documentaries where you've got these warring factions, and at the end of it, they're kind of kissing and hugging. Not literally, but it wasn't far off. But what they recognised during that experience, actually the differences that they had were quite benign. And the commonality that existed was quite striking and profound. And dialogue is so crucial. We live in a country where still there is far too much segregation. There is social segregation, which is problematic, and there is spatial segregation. When those two things come together, then that is a recipe for problems moving forward. While each faith, and I think the point that you were making is that it isn't really rocket science, this. It's simply about you walking in the town centre, you see somebody who's different, perhaps you don't normally speak or acknowledge, a little smile. That evening, that person will go home, and they'll start to just, that was weird, I don't normally smile. It's those little, tiny interactions that don't take much time or effort, but that can be incredibly, incredibly powerful. And I just want to talk very briefly about our approach to shared values. Because I think quite often people felt that governments had this list of shared values or British values, and we expected people to sign up to them. And actually, our approach is quite different. We think the process of discussing where shared values are is as powerful, if not more powerful, than the outcome. Because in that process, you get the interaction and the engagement and the dialogue that you speak about. And we do have challenges in terms of identity. I just want to share with you a quick anecdote. And I was doing a radio phone-in. I share this anecdote quite often because it's so powerful. was in a radio phone-in, and anybody here from Oldham this evening? Okay, it's safe. A chap rang in from Oldham, and he said, it's a disgrace. He said, because the Scottish can celebrate their culture, the Welsh can celebrate their culture, the Irish, they can celebrate their culture. What about the English? Why can't we? And I said, brother, as a fellow Englishman, tell me what you want to celebrate, because I want to celebrate it with you. And he said, do you agree that it's a disgrace that the Scottish can celebrate their culture, the Welsh can celebrate their culture, the Irish can celebrate their culture, the English, why can't we? And I said, no, honestly, brother, I heard you the first time. All I'm asking is, what is it that you want to celebrate, because I genuinely want to celebrate with you? And he said, so you're saying it's not a disgrace that the Scottish can... And at this point, I said to him, you don't really know what you want to celebrate, do you? And, phone-in job would cut him off, and off he went. But I tell you one thing, we dismiss that individual at our peril. There are people like that, of all religions and none, of all different backgrounds, in our communities, in our society, in our cities, towns and villages. They feel they've been denied something. You ask them to verbalise it, they can't. To define it, they can't. To articulate it, they can't. But by God, they've been denied something. And that leaves a kind of psychological vacuum. And if we don't fill it with the values that I believe are here with us this evening, then there are more sinister people out there that fill it as we currently speak. And Sarah said something, I think it's on the video clip, and I just want to echo what she said. We live in a world where we say, certainly in this country, that we're proud of our great British traditions, of tolerance, for example. And to be slightly controversial, I would say, put your tolerance in the bin. Because actually, I don't want to be tolerated. Women in senior management don't want to be tolerated. Disabled people don't want to be tolerated. The LGBT community does not want to be tolerated. Older people don't want to be tolerated. Tolerance is fickle and it's skin deep. When you cut yourself, you tolerate the pain. You miss a train, you tolerate the wait. These are hardly positive experiences. We need to move to society, as Sarah said, which isn't about tolerance, but which is about acceptance and mutual acceptance, which is something which is much deeper and much more sustainable for when we have those challenging times in our country that we invariably will as we move forward. Finally, I'd just like to congratulate all those receiving awards of appreciation this evening, the volunteers, sponsors and supporters of what keeps community organisations like the Dialogue Society going and enables them to carry out the important work that they do. And I would say that we're all leaders in our own way, in our own community, in our family, in our social circles, and quite often we see things that we know aren't quite right. We hear things that we know aren't quite right, and sometimes, for various reasons, we're not able to challenge that. But it's my belief that it's our absolute duty to challenge that in a positive way. And Edmund Burke reminds us that for evil to prevail, all that's required is that good people do nothing. And I know that you're not the kind of good people that are about doing nothing. Thank you.